What does comfortable feel like?
Not sitting straight up, not being all tense.
So not being tense, slouching. That's what I would call it.
Slouching is more comfortable, yes.
Slouching is more comfortable than non-comfortable?
What I really hate is doing depositions.
I know. Depositions are crazy, aren't
they? Where they put you in front of that curtain kind of screen, and then they got the camera going.
And the court reporter.
Oh, the court reporter over here, and 6 attorneys lined up over there. I've been sitting in on some depositions on a case I'm working on. And fortunately, I'm not being deposed yet, but I'm having to sit there and listen to those people that are being deposed.
Really? So they're letting you sit in and watch depositions?
Because, they're asking me to, because I'm the origin expert. And so it's, of all the depositions they're doing, I'm just sitting in on the ones that are related to the origin and the cause of the fire.
Yeah.
And what they saw.
That's weird to be asked. I mean, that's kind of unusual.
I think it is. When I was working, I was deposed.
Right.
And I don't remember anybody being there except the attorneys.
Yeah, that's my experience too. And really a cold room and like the most uncomfortable chair.
Oh, very much so.
Like with nails poking out. It's like a torture chair.
And it's a deposition you think would take, an hour, maybe 2. They can stretch it into 7 hours.
Oh, yeah, because I think they get paid by the hour.
Well, I was too, so it's okay.
There you go. That's the perfect answer. Is there anything fun at all about investigations?
There's lots of fun stuff about
What's fun about investigation? I'd be curious. And don't say donuts and unlimited pizza, because that isn't fun.
It's not.
That's necessary, but it's not fun.
So, well, for me, when I get to work on a team with another investigator, that's fun. But I'm outside. I mean, the investigation, what I'm talking about is the origin part of it, the origin and cause part of it.
Right, when you're out looking around, poking around and stuff.
I mean, you're out there focusing on individual little blades of grass, individual little stones the size of a pea, and hopefully the weather's good.
Yeah.
And so you're out there just by yourself in your world, focusing on the burn indicator, and that's fun. It can get kind of brutal with the weather sometimes, the heat and and I've been out doing it in pouring rain, an origin investigation in pouring rain. I've been out in 105-degree temperatures in South America. That's not fun, but the fun part is following the indicators back and then actually finding the origin and being successful.
And telling the story, right? I mean, telling the story of what happened. And I think you're right. The team part is really fun. You do get to be on really cool teams with cool people.
I do more so now. So when I was working with the Forest Service, I was generally by myself.
Solo Lobo. Yeah.
Yeah. I was the only investigator on the western slope of Colorado, the only special agent with the Forest Service.
Right.
And then take that even a step further down. Of all the special agents with the Forest Service, there's only a smaller handful that's qualified to do fire investigations and interested in doing fire investigations. Right. And so, because there's so many other investigations that have to be done, some of them focus on, drug interdiction, some focus on timber theft, archaeology theft. And so my specialty after about 2000 was fire investigation. And after about 2000, it seems like we started having more and more wildland fires.
Right.
And so I was getting called all over the nation. And then I started getting called to different places around the world, Greece. Mostly that was teaching. The only place I've done the actual investigations is in Brazil, that's outside the U.S.
Introduce yourself to us. So why do we want to know you? Who are you?
I'm not sure why you want to know me.
No, I'll fill in that part later.
Okay.
I'll add that later. That'll be fine. Hi, everybody. Todd Conklin, Pre-Accident Investigation. How are you? It is so good to spend time with you. How is that for the longest cold roll introduction known to mankind? So I should tell you guys, so today's podcast you're going to love. There's really no question about this at all. You're going to love it. So if you don't know, you probably know this, but when you sit down to do a podcast with me, I just turn this stuff on because I find that the conversation we have before we actually officially start the podcast is always super interesting and fun, and everyone's guard's kind of down. It's a really great chance to get to know people. And so the person I talked to today, Brenda Rice is her name. You're going to like her. Super important fire investigator, big investigator. She's perfect for the podcast today. She comes in and we're talking. And so I had everything turned on just like I always do. And I was going to, sneak out, with that little part that said what's fun about being an investigator. But I really liked it when she was talking about, what comfort means and depositions. And then I just couldn't find a place to cut it off. So I thought, well, you can see how we do this because I left like the longest cold roll ever, but I also think it's one of the best ones ever. So I'm completely happy with this. It's fun. It's fun at a bunch of levels, which is kind of how today's conversation is. So everything is grand. I can't even tell you how grand everything is because, at this time of year, one tends to sort of step back and think, let's stock check. Let's take a little look at how life's been so far. And, this has been a year, that's for sure. It's been a year of mostly ups, not a lot of downs, but I sure did get to see a lot of you this year, and that was fun. And I can't wait to see the rest of you. We need to hang out more. That's just it. We need to. And there's going to be some cool opportunities to do that for sure coming up. I mean, we'll get together. We'll make a chance to get together. Next year we got HPRCT. We got the Human Performance Conference with ORCHSC. There's a bunch of places that we can hang out. So don't fret. We'll get together. Mostly what we want to do is start aligning ourselves for the big beginning of the next year. The New Year's resolution period of time where I've been carefully crafting what my New Year's resolution is going to be for months now. Months now, to be really honest. I haven't thought much about it. I need to because it's always kind of a fun time for me. But I gotta have a clever idea. If you got any clever ideas, give them to me. I'm super curious what you're thinking and how you're doing. Other than that, life's going grand. We're slowly but surely, chunk by chunk, piece by piece, story by story, getting people to be in a position where their systems are more reliable and their lives are more fulfilled. Good work, well done, for the right reasons. We know the rules. We learned them this year. This was the year we learned those rules, and that's what we do. So let's just jump into the podcast. If I talk much more, I'll be blabbing out forever. This is Brenda Rice, and Brenda worked for really an entire career as a special investigator for the United States Forest Service. And she is an expert at every level, expert, like an expert's expert in fire investigations for wildland fires, which for those of us on the podcast, no matter where you live, this has become kind of a large issue. If you're in North America, I probably don't need to say more. If you're in Australia, you're burning right now. If you're in Europe, hello, Spain. Wildland fires are becoming more and more a part of what happens. And it's interesting because I really getting the chance to talk to Brenda is a miracle. Getting her on the podcast is a double miracle. But I really like the intersection for her work between culpability and context. And she actually talks about it in a way that I think is really interesting. She talks about the source of spark and the source of ignition. And that is kind of the difference between cause and context, if you think about it. I think you'll find this podcast to be remarkably interesting. You want to know why I think that? Because it is remarkable. It's so interesting, I couldn't find things to cut out in the stupid introduction. Can you imagine what the body of the podcast sounds? Just wait till we get deep into the depths of what we have to talk about. So with that, I should shut up. Because if I shut up, I think I'm better when I shut up. So let me shut up and introduce. This is Brenda Rice. She's going to tell you about herself. Excuse me, I'm getting choked up. That was emotional right there. She's going to tell you about herself and her career, but mostly she's going to talk about the work she does, not in the sense of how she does the work. You should take the class they offer, but in how they think about doing the work, which is the part I find most interesting. And everybody wants more investigators on the podcast. That's the biggest feedback I get. Well, here it is. This is your day. This is the biggest day ever because you're going to get to sit and listen to Brenda Rice. So I'll shut up. Here we go. Sit back and listen. I think you're going to find this incredibly interesting. Here's Brenda.
I'm Brenda Rice. I'm a retired special agent from the U.S. Forest Service. I was with the U.S. Forest Service in southwestern Colorado, in Durango, with the Forest Service as a special agent for about 25 years, and started doing the fire investigations in about 2000, and really got focused on it in 2002.
Interesting. So interesting. And investigations are something that, I mean, people just can't hear enough about. They're constantly fixated on investigations. Why do you guys investigate? Why do you investigate?
So the primary reason to investigate a fire, obviously to determine who caused it or what caused it, then the who caused it. But if you can determine what caused it, initially back in the 70s or 80s, the purpose of fire investigation was to develop prevention programs.
Right.
So
to learn and improve.
To learn and improve,
right.
Yeah. To learn, okay, what are our main causes of fires out here? And if we don't go out and do an investigation, we don't know that our main problem, and maybe in this area, was carbon particles from exhaust from trucks going up the hill, or maybe it was escaped campfires. So once we find out what the causes were, then we can develop a prevention program. Hence, Smokey Bear comes in there with, crush your butts with the cigarettes, putting on spark arresters on ATVs, motorcycles to prevent fires. If we learn those are the causes of the fires.
Wow. How did you learn to do this?
So we have a training course I learned back in 1991.
That was when they taught on stone tablets, right? They had stone tablets and
pretty much.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was definitely a while ago, and that was in the late 80s, I believe, was when the Forest Service started realizing we need to develop a fire investigation program, and they developed it under the prevention program of wildland fire suppression. Then in the late 90s, a handful of investigators with several agencies, Forest Service, BLM, and some state agencies, realized we don't have a process. We don't have a scientific methodology, a methodology to follow that is peer-reviewed to follow. So starting in the late 90s, they developed a one-week course. It's called Wildland Fire Origin and Cause Determination. It's a week-long course that teaches you to follow a prescribed scientific methodology, and then it goes into all the different fire causes, and it's a phenomenal course. Again, it's a week long, and it's one of its really highlighted strengths is 3 days of out in the field where we actually go out and like the Sunday before the class starts on Monday, we burn the teaching plots.
Wow.
And so the students watch the death by PowerPoint for the first day or so.
Right.
And then every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, for the entire second half of each of those days, they're out there on hands and knees following the burn indicators. And those are, down on their hands and knees with dental picks as need be.
What tips do you have for people who do investigations? What have you learned through the years that have made you a better investigator, in your opinion?
First and foremost, don't get any expectation bias or confirmation bias.
How do you manage that? How do you manage that because bias is really hard, and I agree with you 100%. How do you manage it?
Experience, really, and experience realizing that you get there and you see a campfire, the remains of a campfire ring, and so you're expecting it to be the campfire.
Right.
That's just human nature.
Sure.
To expect that. Then you have to back up and realize, no, follow your methodology, do the whole process of walking the perimeter a couple of times, following the burn indicators, and let the individual burn indicators lead you back. If it leads you back to the campfire ring, fine, but it may lead you elsewhere. And I get around it because I've gotten to origins, general origin areas where I see what could easily be the cause of that wildfire, but then I follow the indicators and it leads me back to another origin.
Wow.
So knowing that is how I myself can overcome the
But
expectation
that's pretty
bias.
hard to do. I mean, that kind of bias is really tough. But how much preparation, like on the way to an investigation, do you do much preparation? Do you pre-read? Do you go in cold or do you go in hot?
So
If
not
that
as
makes
far
sense.
as
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, not
it
as far
sounded
as
professional
pre-reading.
though, kind of.
Yeah, there's things that that you do. There's a lot of pre-work,
Right.
to put it that way, that you do for an investigation, especially as investigations in your area.
Right.
You learn it's a local knowledge.
Right.
You learn the roads, the cultural uses of the area.
Yeah.
So I know ahead of time maybe that, okay, we've had a fire over in this part of the national forest, and that area over in there is where a lot of kids go to party. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe as I'm coming in, I need to be watching for the vehicles coming out. I need to be looking for the big piles of tires they may have been burning, or pallets.
Right.
Or this is an area where a train goes through, and it's not uncommon to have carbon particles from the train. So I'm already teaching myself the local knowledge of the area. But then the actual day of the fire, when you get the call to respond to go determine the origin, you're looking at, as you're driving to, you're looking at what the smoke column's doing. You're looking at what the wind is doing. Paying attention to the smoke column is important because the wind is extremely important on us determining the origin.
Right.
And so I guess those are the main things. Most of it is just developing experience, and it's a perishable skill.
I agree. And the weird thing about investigating is you need experience, but I don't know how to tell you to get experience if you want to be an investigator. You know what I mean? It's this weird chicken and egg cycle kind of. It's bizarre. And like for me, and this has only happened maybe in the last 15 years, I've kind of quit preparing because in order to fight the bias part of it, I go in and I haven't pre-read, because when I sit and pre-read or when I think about the event before I go and look at the event, I almost always formulate some opinions that I have a hard time knocking back down. I have to like shoot them with a fire hose. Get down.
So you mean, I think I'm following you now. So you mean more pre-reading you're pre-reading about the incident.
Yeah, the incident.
Okay, so yeah, let me back up on that.
No, I think your answer was brilliant.
Okay, because there's the origin investigation I was doing when I was working as a special agent. I had basically the entire gamut of it,
right,
from getting the phone call from dispatch, getting out there, hopefully being one of the first ones on the scene. Granted, the initial attack has arrived and may have damaged or somehow affected the origin.
Right.
Like walking over it, spraying water.
Right. Whatever.
Mm-hmm. But then, and I would have to arrive on the scene and do control of the evidence, control of the scene, plus interview any witnesses. Then do the origin investigation. Then continue with after the fact interviews, and then write it all up and say it was an escaped campfire.
Right.
And so I wrote it all up, including the factors that led up to it. Did they maintain it improperly? Did they leave it unattended? Were they burning during a fire ban? So I put all that together, then put the entire case report together with the witness statements and all, take that to the prosecutor or to a civil attorney and decide if they're going to go civil or criminally. But now that I'm retired, my consulting job is taking what I just explained now that someone else has done. So another investigator has taken all that.
Yeah.
And then I read their report. And then I go out to the scene. So yeah, I can't do the scene protection because it can be going out there a week or two later.
Right.
And as long as I've gone out as long as 16 months after the origin of the fire.
Wow.
To try and follow what burn indicators are left back to the origin to corroborate or disprove what the initial investigator, what the written up investigation says.
So let me ask this question. It's kind of a weird question, but it's an important one, at least to me. Do you think there's a difference between a cause and a description? A cause and an explanation? I told you it was weird. It's a weird question, but I think it's one I think about a lot.
So to me, in my vernacular, the cause is the item that started the fire. That what is the item? The
physics, right? The thing.
What thing?
Yeah.
First came that produced heat high enough to bring the forest fuels to the ignition point.
Yeah.
That is the cause.
That's kind of the trigger, right? In a way. I mean, that sort of triggers the event. It
is. And I'm drawing a blank right now. So there's the cause and there's the ignition factors.
Ignition factor. That's cool.
So that's probably most tied into what you're talking about, the explanation.
Yeah.
So the ignition factors, again, back to the example I was using of a campfire. The cause is the wind picked up and a burning ember blew out of the campfire.
Right.
And dropped into the leaves.
So really simple, really linear. The cause is understandable.
Cause is right there. But the ignition factors are the fact that a front came through and the winds picked up. They didn't have sufficient clearing around their campfire. They maybe were building too big of a fire.
Humidity was low. Dry season. Bad snow.
Dry forest fuels. The fuel moistures were so low that that little ember, once it ignited, the leaves or the brush was able to carry and carry like instantly and blow out maybe a mile in the first evening.
And the story for improvement then is really not the story of the cause. That's just the ember. It's the story of what you're calling the ignition factors. That's really where there's lots of places for us to learn. That's where we can make differences. That's where we can put spark arresters on ATVs. All those things become really interesting.
Correctly. And that's where we, when we realized that those ignition factors for, in this case, the campfire, could be conducive to fires escaping.
Wow.
That's when we put in burn restrictions.
Yeah. Wow. So you're so interesting to me because you're one of the few investigators that I can talk to that really understands the law enforcement side and also the overall contextual side, the learning and improving side. And they're very different. Law enforcement, an investigation that's done for law enforcement is really done to determine culpability to a great extent. Fair enough?
Correct.
Whereas a big ignition factors rich investigation, really culpability's kind of secondary. What you're really looking at are the multiple factors that came together in a way to create the conditions by which this giant fire could happen, right?
Correct. Right.
How do you see that intersection? Because I think people struggle all across the world in industry with sort of the tension between a culpability-based investigation, which I'll just show my cards really quickly, Brenda. I don't think they're worth a crap. I mean, I don't think you learn a lot from a culpability other than who's culpable. And a more context-rich, ignition factors-rich investigation, which allows the company or the country or the organization or whoever had the failure to really improve from it. How do you justify the difference between those two? Because you do both.
So with the culpability part, as well as and I'm just going to call it the prevention part.
Sure. Oh, that's a much better word. Yeah, that's perfect.
As an example, let's use a dirt bike, a motorcycle, where motorcyclists sometimes like to ream out their spark arrestor.
Sure.
And
because you get a little more performance.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm with you on that one. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so the spark arrestor meets standards of what size of a particle can escape through it. And so if they ream it out, now then they've caused a fire possibly with all those conditions, right?
Sure.
So if we find the culpable individual and the offending spark arrestor, we take the spark arrestor to a lab, have it tested to see if it does meet the parameters or have they modified it somehow. So then we find out they have modified it, and now we have a culpable person. To me, then, taking them, making them accountable for it, either civilly or criminally, then we get the word out through just publicity that, if I remount my spark arrestor, I might be responsible for this $1 million fire, and I might get a bill for it. So that's how I tie the culpability to the prevention.
That's interesting, too, because that so I'm not sure the deterrence part of that works very well. In fact, I can probably show you evidence where it's not very, because it's the law of small numbers. The chances my dirt bike would cause the fire are really low. But I like how you guys are building based upon what you're learning contextually on the prevention side of the equation, because I think the power we have in a non-law enforcement investigation, in a we're not policemen now, we're just people trying to improve and learn. The power we have is not in the story of the spark, the cause, because the cause is really, you get heat at a certain height. It's really linear. It obeys the laws of physics. The power we have is in the story of all the conditions, the factors, the context, we call it, around the event, because that gives us a lot of different things we can choose to look at and improve. And that's really valuable. And those context-rich investigations, I think, make a huge difference. And that's what you guys do. That's exactly what you described to me.
Okay. I agree.
Yeah. When you nod your head on a podcast, no one knows what that means.
I understand that. Yeah, I'm trying to process what you said and put it into the context of my experience.
Well, it's what I think is so cool is that intersection between your two. You've always lived in two worlds as an investigator. You live in a world.
Correct.
So when you write an investigation, you're really writing two investigations. Fair? And jump in and tell me I'm wrong, because I'm wrong on a ton of crap, so that won't hurt my feelings. But you're writing really an investigation that could have criminal liability. It could be used for culpability.
Correct.
Yeah. And an investigation that actually goes out to a whole entire community of wildland fire people who help them understand prevention and really fire science and study those fires. You do both.
That's correct, yes.
And I think that intersection is really cool, because you're constantly between those two. That's really cool.
And what's also really cool is I was talking about, we teach the ignition sources is the part of it, the causes.
Right.
And that started out to be about a 3-hour section of that week-long course. And now we can barely fit it into almost 6 hours, because there's always new causes coming on. So, everyone knows about cigarettes, and everyone knows about carbon particles from exhaust. But we're getting more different causes now that is causing some industry people to look at things like Chinese lanterns.
Yeah.
You see them, going
because they're
out.
Gorgeous, right?
They're
beautiful.
They're beautiful, but if they come down, if they land before that little candle has extinguished, they're causing wildfires.
Yeah, of course.
The wind turbines.
Oh, really?
When a wind turbine fails, it is very spectacular, and it throws flame and hot particles from it down into the grasses below it. And obviously, when the wind turbine is spinning so hard, the winds are high.
Right,
and
of course.
When that ember drops, then that's the potential for an extreme wildfire is there. Same with power lines, and that's what you're seeing in California, with when the conditions are so extreme that causes power line failures. Those conditions are also extreme for fire behavior.
Right. So it's almost the perfect environment by which a wildland fire can happen. So if you had to give, I don't know, if you gave your lesson, the things you've learned as an investigator, what would your tips be to people who do investigations?
Just keep doing investigations. Be very, very patient. Go out there and compartmentalize when you get out to an origin. As an example, you get out to a fire that's hitting national, if not international news, because it's gone thousands and thousands of acres and there's fatalities, and it's just horrendous. You've got to compartmentalize that and realize you're not the firefighter. You're the origin expert. Your job is to focus down on this less than a 2-acre area, and finally down to an area that is like 10 feet by 10 feet. Your job is to be patient and try and compartmentalize and in effect block out all the chaos that's going on around you and focus on the individual stems of grass, the individual burn indicators. Find the origin, because you have to find the origin before you can find the cause. And so, in a way, put blinders on to the world around you and focus on that and be very patient. It can take anywhere from a few hours, which is very uncommon to be that quickly, up to multiple days to find the origin of any wildfire.
Wow. So it's all in the details. The details are what matter. And I love how you say compartmentalize. Thanks for your time. This was great. I'm so pleased to get the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You were amazing. Thank you. And there you have it. What do you think? Wasn't that good? Sorry, I was so loud. I know. You'd think I'd get the hang of this after a while. I'm not. It's not going to happen. It's never going to just relax. It will not happen. So that's the podcast. Special giant thanks to Brenda and to you for listening. I found that really interesting. It's fun to talk to somebody who does that and does it a lot in a big way. And I think it's good for us to listen to. So that's good. So keep listening. Thanks for being here. Learn something new every single day. Have as much fun as you possibly can. And for goodness sakes, be safe.